Well, according to most of the polls you reported, LDP would be struggling alone. But also, even with Komeito, their coalition partner, it's unlikely that they will reach the majority, which means that they would probably have to tie hands. Of course, we have the independent, that may merge with the LDP, but, we have to have some kind of a coalition, if such is the case, that would be added on. And that would cause a bit of a confusion and particularly anxiety about future policies ahead of us.
I also would like to understand in more detail what is the economic implication here. If we see a significant change in government, what does this mean in terms of the Japanese economy going forward?
I think one of the biggest misunderstanding that is going on is that, Japan isn't really run by the politicians. Well, it is, but, it's implemented by the bureaucrats. And you have to have a very good tie and pipeline with these bureaucrats. And at this moment and in the past, well, 5 decades, the only party that was able to do this with a lot of eloquent move is the LDP. As you reported earlier, in 2009 to 2012, we had DPJ, Democratic Party of Japan, taking over, which basically dropped everyone's jaw in Japan because they were so incompetent in actually completing anything, because partly one of the biggest reasons, in my opinion, is that they really didn't have that tie. So I think what we really need to see is coalition, but, with a continuous lead by the LDP, or else I think we will see an unfortunate, I would say, bottlenecks in various parts of the policies that will be implemented.
Well, the reason why I was asking about the economic outlook here is because there's a lot of question marks about what this will mean also for the Bank of Japan. Do you think this election is going to make it harder for the Bank of Japan to actually deploy its monetary policy and potentially announce further rate hikes?
Good question, because I'm supposed to say, if I'm reading the textbook, hey, Bank of Japan shouldn't be affected by the political moves. But, as you connotate very strongly, in Japan it is. Yeah, you're right. And the fact of the matter is the instability of the government certainly gives rather a negative note. That said, though, I think Bank of Japan is looking more at the possible inflationary fears that would basically give a lot of anxiety to the Japanese consumers. As you just reported, we have an inflation that is fairly under control. But, the wage rise, which has not been made in the past 20 years, the only OECD nation that, hasn't given any wage rise in the past 20 years is Japan. So basically, people's lives are becoming quite tough, and that could be a very big cause of, various policy changes by the government, which, Bank of Japan would be looking closely. One example I can give you is a very interesting diffusion index, which people don't talk about, but Bank of Japan looks at this comfortable living index, and it's basically an index, diffusion index by the consumers, but that was minus 54, the lowest since, the Lehman crisis, which tells you that people are starting to suffer for the first time in 2 decades. So, I think there will be a lot of policy changes that has to be implemented if we see this trend going on further.